Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy M.K.S here, back in another video. Sorry, I was just finishing my tea there. As ever, I'd love to read your comments and suggestions or whatnot, and hopefully some people out there will enjoy it, especially football fans and soccer for any Americans out there, or calcio for Italians, and in particular Roma fans. But yeah, on that note, I would love to I hope people from across different countries will stumble across this video, watch this video and enjoy it. And if you're from another country like Malaysia or India or Indonesia, Singapore, or anywhere else, I would love to read, or even China, I'd love to read terms for football in your country or in your language. But yeah, I hope people out there, as they will enjoy it. And one of the things I want to say before I got into the video, and I know I do try and keep these intros short if I can, but I just want to quickly say a dream or idea I had for Italian football generally is that I would love for there to be a committee or think tank or cooperative network or whatever you want to call it, let's say cooperative, to make it simple, which would seek to do whatever's best for Italian football, including in terms of acquiring investment for football pitches, academies or whatnot, and that kind of thing, and basically whatever benefits Italian football. They discuss what benefits Italian football. And I'd love for as many citizens of Italy, as many people in Italy as possible, as well as those from the diaspora, to connect, as many of them as possible, to connect together, like even parents, pupils, teachers, schools, the FIGC, Italian FA, Serie A, and even the lower leagues, and also the grassroots level, banks, businesses, politicians, councillors and whatnot from Italy, and again even connecting with those from the diaspora or fans of football generally, of Italian football, generally, and Serie A generally, especially from around the world, perhaps, especially those with Italian roots, to discuss what's best for Italian football. As ever, I'd love to hear what you think about that idea and all the other ideas I discuss here, and maybe I should include it in the video itself, in the list itself rather than the intro, but as I say, I do try and keep them short and sweet if I can. But here goes. So number 31, again, normally I love Italian football teams generally, but because Roma's nickname is the Gialorossi, I thought it'd be interesting if they were like the Gialorossi Galacticos, as I mentioned before, like what the Galacticos are. So yeah, that's why I suppose just for that reason alone, I'm mainly focusing on Roma at the moment. But yeah, I'd love for them to become the Galacticos. And normally people, when I talk about like being a fan of Italian football generally, they're like, they say, how can you support all the Italian teams equally, or how can you, or even just generally, like normally the teams don't get along with each other, and most quote unquote normal football fans, if you like, or normal people, would support one. Not football fans, let's say, would support one team, or maybe have a soft spot for another, but they wouldn't normally support all the Italian teams, even all Latin teams, even, and have so many teams that they support. But because I'm just a bit quirky like that. But yeah, I'm focusing on Roma because, as I say, they have Galacticos. They have Gialorossi in the name, which reminds me of Galacticos. So I'd love for them to develop this Galacticos team, and I suppose they would probably have more chance of doing so than, say, Genoa, which also starts with J, of course. But I think Genoa would have a longer time to get to the level where Roma have got to. If it happened for Genoa instead, I would be just as happy, I suppose. So these ideas could probably apply to Genoa as well, or instead, perhaps. Although I suppose it would be hard to see it happening for both, so it would either have to be one or the other. Number 32, again, I'd love for them to learn from former Roma teams, and also former players to be like ambassadors for the club, but also to talk about history and what they could learn. So from their experiences, to talk to the youth, young players especially, or the new players just generally, but especially younger players, to talk about what they've learned. And again, I'd love for there to be committees, think tanks, to look at what's best for Italian football generally, including, or especially even teams like Roma, perhaps. And I suppose when it comes to representation in Europe, there's only really three Italian teams, 3 or 4 that, well, I suppose depending on how you look at it, that technically there's only 3 that could represent Italy in terms of winning trophies. Although if Italian teams go further, even if they don't win trophies, they could be good for the coefficient or or that kind of thing. But yeah, mainly I'm interested in winning trophies personally. But yeah, if it'd be great for Roma to learn from previous Roma teams as well as other Italian teams and Celtic and Real Madrid and just teams generally, and see what they can learn generally from the world. And maybe if going on what I talked about in the intro, I think it'd be great if Italian football invited potential investors and sponsors to talk about what sort of things they want to see, which would encourage them to invest. Number 33, on that note, again, I'd love for Italian football teams, including Roma, of course, maybe even working with Celtic, to talk to investors and to generally learn and think about what they could do to attract investment, not just from Italy, but all around the world, from Arab investors, African investors, Asian investors, Latin American investors, European investors, and whatnot. And maybe, like I say, local businesses, in this case, like say in Rome, or even across Italy, could talk about what teams like Roma could do to attract investment from their experience. Obviously, being in business, those who are in business would know what it takes to acquire funding for their business, for instance. So hopefully they would be able to pass on that knowledge to Roma, so that they could, and other Italian teams. Obviously, at the moment I'm trying to focus on more on Roma, but to look at what they could do to acquire investment. Number 34, on that note, I would love to read from people who have ideas that could attract investment into Roma and just benefit the club generally. That even if it's not just the money that comes in, but also how they spend that money, how they could. I think it's important to have good scouts that can spot good players, so they don't waste too much money as well. So they use that money wisely to invest in academies. For instance, with financial fair play, one way to get around it would probably be to invest in academies. I'm sure there's not so many rules, if there are any at all, on investing in academies, so they can invest in those academies, which would mean in the future, although that you'd have to be more patient to wait for the team to be successful and that success to transfer onto the pitch in the case of academies. Number 35, again, maybe Italy could offer like tax exemptions and things like that, and access to markets and things like that to entice investment, attract investment into teams like Roma and other Italian teams, say especially Roma. Number 36, again, maybe they could learn from other sports as well, and again, learn from business and the world, the universe itself, and whatnot, and listening to potential investors and sponsors about, again, what sort of things they would want in return, like how they can improve their PR. Maybe some would want to sponsor stands, or have their own shops or businesses in the stadium, or as close to the stadium. Sorry, I can speak probably as possible. Number 37. Again, I think there's probably a lot of things they could learn from Celtic and vice versa. And I suppose it would be hard to see rival teams work together in many ways. But again, I would love to see a committee that would bring together the FIGC, at least Serie A, the people who run Serie A, and those who run like Serie B, Serie C, G, or however you pronounce it, and some of the lower league teams and grassroots teams, and even working with schools to look at how they can encourage more people to play football and get active in sport, especially football, and parents allowing children to play in the street and in the parks and play football as much as possible, join academies and join centres where they can play football, youth clubs and things like that. So yeah, even like police forces, maybe talking about like how to keep people out of trouble, and cut back on crime and bring the communities together through football, including migrant communities. But even all those in Rome, or at least one side of Rome. I know Lazio fans wouldn't be the same, and I believe Lazio is in Rome as well. But obviously that's why they're rivals. It might be just on the outskirts, I'm not sure. But anyway, that side of Rome where Roma fans are, they could unite together behind the team and like cut crime and encourage each other and play football together and have a sense of purpose, which hopefully will keep them out of trouble and keep them engaged in society and things like that. Number 38, again, as I mentioned in part 3, I dream that the club will do a lot of good for the community, Rome itself, and also across Italy and around the world as well. Number 39, I'm running out of ideas, but I probably had a few ideas that I couldn't quite remember. But I think those are the main sort of ideas, and hopefully if they develop those ideas, if I think about what the main goal is, they will be able to develop the Gialorossi, Galacticos, and Roma can become one of the most, if not the most successful teams, sorry, in the world. That was supposed to be. And number 40, again, I'd love to read your comments. I know I do have a habit of going into like 40-point lists. So yeah, I was stumbling there to think about different ideas. But yeah, basically to encourage investment, to offer incentives to investors, and hopefully to win as many trophies as possible, whilst also doing good for the world. So again, I'd love to see Roma winning Super Cups, Champions Leagues, World Club Cups, and trophies like that, and to win the most in Europe or internationally, perhaps, all being well. I may dream, hey. Anyway, I'm out. Peace and love.